It's good to be with you tonight. I am thankful to be here and glad that we can, just like Ryan said in his prayer, be back together on Wednesday nights for a midweek Bible study. And oh man, I'll just be honest with you. I enjoy teaching the teens and I enjoy teaching the college kids, but speaking to like adults, I feel like I'm just not qualified for it. Just 90% of the time. It's just because my knowledge is so limited, like with the Word. And when you got men and women that I really respect in this room, and thankfully Danny's not here. I mean, I wish he was here, but you know. Like all the time after I speak, he's like, "What did you say about this?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I forgot," you know. So I'm glad to be here. Glad that I can study this. And you know, Matt did kind of text me last minute, which is okay. That's not a problem, Matt. I mean, it is at the most stressful time of the year for me. This dealing with a lot of pressure, plus everything else going on is pretty stressful. Now I've got this fever blister come up on my mouth, so times are just not great. You know, times are really just not great right now. But he texted me and he said, here's our topics, here's the layout. And, you know, at first it was like, of course, all the fruits of the Spirit that are listed. And then he was like, by the way, but I do need you to do like next week. And I was like, it's like 4 days from now. I was like, okay, what's the topic? And he was like, the topic is, why does the fruit of the Spirit matter? I was like, okay, well, that's not even any easier for anybody. So I don't know. As soon as he texted that, I struggled because I wanted to text back, and I've spoken a lot of different places before and have a lot of different topics sent my way, and never have I had this thought cross my mind, but when he sent it to me, I really honestly wanted to send it back and just say, look, I'm not qualified right now. I'm just not qualified. And I don't mean qualified as in like I don't have the knowledge. I mean, I don't, as many people do. I don't have all that knowledge that they have, but I mean qualified as in I have not been bearing the fruit of the Spirit for the past few months. All right, that's just as honest as I can be with you tonight. Had a lot going on personally, had a lot going on professionally in my work, and dealing with a lot of stress with my friends and family, and of course, then you got everything else in the world going on right now, and it's just been a tough few months. Just being as honest as I can be, and I really didn't feel like I needed to be the one up here talking to you about what the fruit of the Spirit is and why it matters, because I feel like personally I've not taken it too seriously as of recent. I've kind of neglected what we're going to read here in a few minutes about what this fruit of the Spirit is and why it matters. And I'll say this, and before I get really too far into it, I want to thank each of you for being here, number one, and number two, I want to thank our eldership and our leadership with the deacons and everybody. And, I lead a group of about 10 plus people at any given time, and let me just tell you, dealing with 10 people is difficult, okay? Having to lead them and having to give them direction and tell them what to do. You can never make everybody happy. I'm always feel like I'm the enemy of someone, and it's okay. I don't have to be everybody's friend. That's fine. I enjoy if they don't stop by my office at times. It's good and peaceful. But when I make these decisions throughout the year, I'm always questioned, just constantly questioned. And boy, let me tell you, it wears me out. I mean, it really does wear thin on my patience. And so I find myself not bearing the fruit of the Spirit whenever I'm working with my employees. And then you add on top of all that the stress of COVID-19, and people come from all different walks of life and backgrounds and raisings, and they can handle things so differently than I do, and it's just frustrating, and it just feels like some people believe this and some people believe that. You've got mask and no mask, and it's just constantly debate back and forth. And I'll admit to you right now, I'm on a side. I'm not going to tell the side I'm on, but I'm on a side of what I would consider as political. But I can tell you this right now. It does not matter. It does not matter. And as I studied these verses, man, I was convicted big time and humbled big time, because I just thought, how foolish of me to read these verses and to feel like I claim to be this Christian. I work at a Christian university. I claim to be a Christian to all these people, and I speak at these places. And in a moment where one thing, okay, it is a pandemic, one thing comes up and hits me in the back and pushes against me, and I need to pick political sides. And what matters is my right. What matters is I'm an American. What matters is all these things, and I choose a president over another. And I start looking at Facebook posts, and I get infuriated inside of me reading these things, and it just takes over my whole day, and it ruins my attitude. And the way I talk to people and the way I react to situations is affected by these things going on around me in the world. And I completely deny this entire teaching. I just completely forget about it. So if you wonder why I don't feel qualified, it's because, honestly, I just feel like I haven't done what I've been called to do. And that's to bear the fruit of the Spirit. If you'll turn in your Bibles to Galatians chapter 5, we're going to spend a few minutes there tonight. Matt, I think I went too many. when Matt kind of texted me this, why does the fruit of the Spirit matter? It's a pretty broad question. And I wish I could tell you that tonight I'm going to give you an answer that is really theological, and it's going to have these humongous words in it, and it's going to be really impressive what I wrote, but it's just not. I'm going to tell you it's not. Okay, what I'm going to tell you tonight is pretty simple. When you read these verses yourself, I assume that you would walk away with this conclusion. So I'm not going to tell you anything that's earth-shattering or groundbreaking for you, but for me, it was a reminder I needed, and something I needed to hear, and I wish that I had read 5 months ago when all this started going on, because I really needed to hear it. We'll start in verse 16. He says, "But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the desires of the flesh are against the Spirit, and the desires of the Spirit are against the flesh. For these are opposed to each other, to keep you from doing the things that you want to do. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. And now the works of the flesh are evident." And before we get into these, I want you to put yourself in Paul's shoes of who he's writing to at the time. Churches in Galatia he's talked to, a lot of these people are Christians per se, whatever you want to call them, they were, and he's talking about idolatry and different things in the verses before. And in chapter 2, verse 20, the most famous verse in all of Scripture, I could quote the whole section. We know it's, "I have been crucified with Christ," the ESV version here. "It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me." He's trying to convince these people that, look, you're not saved by works, you're saved by faith. He goes on in chapter 3 to talk about the righteous shall live by faith. And then the law and the promise, he's trying to explain to them the old law versus the new law. And it's just a constant back and forth. And he gets to chapter 5, and he's wrapping this whole section up here out before he gets into his last chapter in chapter 6, talking about bearing one another's burdens, which I feel like we could probably hear a lesson on tonight as well. And he goes in these verses, and he talks about the Spirit. And here's all I'm going to say about the Spirit tonight. I'm going to say anything else about the Spirit because I'm not Danny Eubanks, and I can't do an incredible class about it, okay? What I do remember the most, I wrote this down in bold letters that he spoke with that night, and I'll tell you this, I do believe the Spirit dwells within us. I believe the Spirit works. But what I agree the most with Danny about is he said this in his class. The Spirit is not miraculous. He's not going to heal me or stop me from being in a car wreck. I don't believe that. What I do believe is that it's supernatural. And Danny says that in his class. And it's not something that I really understand. And honestly, I don't need to understand it. I don't need that to believe. What I know is that God says here, you'll be led by the Spirit, you'll walk with the Spirit, you'll keep in step with the Spirit. He's about to describe things in the next few verses that for the most part we deal with on a daily basis at any year. It doesn't matter when it is, any generation. But I would say there's about 5 or 6 words that for the past 5 months have attacked Christians like distinctly. I can't recall a time where I've seen more, and maybe it's just because of social media and just the access we have to information nowadays through our phones and everything else, but I've never seen more Christians against each other and divided and rivalries and pitted against one another. In an American civilization where we're never persecuted for our faith. And instead of being persecuted by non-believers, we're persecuting each other. It's really, I don't know. It's a fascinating read here. Verse 19. He says, "Now the works of the flesh are evident. Sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery." I'm not really like dealing with sorcery any day here, right? I'm not facing that temptation personally. But for these next few words, just ask yourself, is this something you've struggled with the past few months? Is this something that has kind of been on your heart? Enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy. I'll stop there for just a second. I could just feel like I could just put a screen up, just of all the things I've seen on social media and the text my friends have seen me that worship at other congregations all across the state. And the things they're dealing with and it's crazy that people my age even know about this stuff, but it's happening all across the church. All throughout the brotherhood. And we'll get to the world. But for right now, I want you to see like jealousy, strife, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions. Has there ever been a time in my lifetime that there has been more of this dividing us? Personally, I don't think so. And I don't know where you're, maybe this hasn't bothered you at all. And if so, like, let's talk afterwards and tell me how you do that, because it has not been that way for me. And I don't just mean divisions and rivalries and enmity and strife and jealousy here. I mean, at my work with the people I work side by side with, I mean, it's like constant, just head to head. Everybody's got an opinion on something. And again, let me clarify this. Everything I'm saying to you, in reality, I'm saying to myself. Because it is constantly that I am participating in these things and I'm forgetting about what I'm about to read to you in just a few minutes. These words here that Paul is describing to these people, it's crazy how they translate all the way to today. And just for the past few months, wave after wave, storm after storm, hits us in the back, and I fall into this trap. He goes on in verse 21, and he says, drunkenness and orgies and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. You want to talk about convicting. It's not any simpler. It's not any easier to read. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's pretty simple. When we give in to Satan, and if you don't believe he's at work right now, boy, are we mistaken. He is working as hard as I feel like he's ever worked on me. When we give in to these things, you guys, we are completely removing ourselves from our relationship with Christ. It's almost as if I'm completely ignoring what this has all been about for me since the moment I became a Christian. So, I go on to verse 22. And this is where we'll kind of spend our time tonight. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. And against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. And if we live by the Spirit, let us also keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking one another or envying one another. If I had to answer the question, why does the fruit of the Spirit matter? This is what I would say. The fruit of the Spirit is the quintessential, there's your big word, all right, depiction of Jesus' life and personality while on earth. It matters because it is the closest that we can get to living a Christ-like life. When I was at Mr. Danny's house the other night, Liv and I went over there to take him some vegetables, and appreciate you guys for all feeding him. He has so much food he doesn't know what to do. So we sat down and talked, and as I sat down, just was talking, I said, he told me that he heard I was speaking, and I said, yeah, I'm the fruit of the Spirit. And he said, remember, it's fruit of the Spirit, not fruits. I said, I appreciate you saying that. I needed to hear it again. As I read this as a child, I always said fruits of the Spirit, like constantly. That's just what I always said, fruits of the Spirit. But it's a good reminder that it's singular. It's not plural. When we give our lives to Christ and the waters of baptism, we come out and we are born again. We are born anew. And the Spirit comes into our life, and we begin to walk in a relationship with Christ, and we begin to walk by the Spirit. We grow and mature as Christians over time. I would say that the way, and I'm going to use him again because he's not here, the way that Danny Eubanks would react to a situation that I am currently in and the way that I react to it are completely different. Now, some situations may vary on that, but for the most part, I would say that the way Mr. Danny would react to a situation that I am in at work would reflect patience and love and joy and peace and kindness and gentleness and self-control. And if you ask the people I work with right now, hey, what is Jojo's reaction in a current situation? If you could describe his personality, what would it be? Here's what I guess they would say. Quick to speak, quick to anger, incredibly impatient, focused on himself, not gentle at all, pretty harsh if anything. It's the complete opposite of what I'm supposed to be showing, what I'm supposed to be living, the depiction of Jesus' life while he was on earth. If the Christians and the disciples that follow Jesus could describe him in words and could give you adjectives to talk about his life, I just have to believe this is what they would say. The past few months have made me wake up at some days, and I mean, it's just like I automatically get up and I'm in a bad mood. I mean, I'm just frustrated, I'm angry. There is no joy anywhere around me, okay? There's no joy in my household. And then I get to work and I'm still like coming with an angry face, I tell you. And all of my employees fall right in line. I mean, they do. They're just like, well, he's angry today, so am I. See ya. And it's just immediately tune out. My family's the same way. My friends the same way. I'm constantly defying what I'm supposed to be doing. The fruit of the Spirit matters because it's the quintessential depiction of the life that Jesus lived while on earth in his personality. And if we reflect these things, if we bear the fruit of the Spirit, it's the closest that we're going to be to reflecting Jesus' life here. I told you earlier that Danny says in his class that the Spirit is not miraculous, but he is supernatural. I say this, when we show these things, joy, peace, love, patience, self-control, goodness, faithfulness, when we show these things to people around us, to non-believers, we're almost viewed as supernatural. In today's world, it's hard to find people that are just outright joyful, okay? And those people that are, like, I'm sure you can think of one person right now, it's like, that guy's just always so happy, all right? Like, he is just constantly, she is always she's always at peace. If you've ever been around me long enough, you know I speak about my great-grandmother a lot. She's from Selmer here. She passed away back in 2000, I think it was 2010. She passed away when she was 95. And I lived with her for quite some time. I loved her to death, like close as I could ever be to anybody. I loved her to death. And that woman, I mean, if I could just write down words about her, I have to believe this is what I would say. She just was constantly joyful. I mean, even on the day that she died, I sat by her bedside and like, she was excited to go. I mean, she was so happy to be leaving this earth. I mean, could not wait to go. She was excited for me to be by her side holding her hand. She was so happy. She was at peace. She loved everyone. And I don't just mean like here and there, just family. I mean, if you walked in her home, she loved you. She had this unbelievable amount of self-control. When people, her closest family members, would betray her and do things to her that were absurd and, I mean, would just send me into anger, she never once broke. She always showed love and peace and patience and self-control and kindness and gentleness. And again, the past few months, I have not done that. The fruit of the Spirit is a physical manifestation of a Christian's transformed life. When we fully give our lives to Christ and we begin to walk like he walked, that is what it looks like on earth. Our physical bodies, our personality, our way we act, the way we treat others, the way we react in a situation is the physical manifestation of the fruit of the Spirit. I want to, jump over to John 15 for a few minutes, and we'll come back to this, but if you will, jump over to John 15 with me. John 15 is probably one of my favorite, section of verses in the Bible. It's just the way it is written is beautiful. The things that Jesus says here to the people around him is just fascinating, the way he words it. You know, recently, I spoke about this in a devotional on Wednesday night a while back. Back in January, February, I asked Mr. Danny to help me grow a garden. I grew up in Iuka, Mississippi, and my grandparents had a huge garden on about 5 or 6 acres. And I remember the whole summer I would spend every day out there. And at the time, I despised it. I did not want to go. Right? I did not want to be picking all these vegetables and spending all day in the orchard with them, picking pears and apples and all these things. But that's just what I did. That was my summer for me. And as I've gotten older, obviously, things changed. You matured, and that's something like I always want to do now. I just want to have my own garden. And so Mr. Danny, starting, around April, May, we tilled it up and we got my garden ready, and he and I planted 6 or 7 rows, pretty small, just enough for me and Liv and for him. And man, let me tell you, I have soaked up so much knowledge, even way past gardening. Now, I'll tell you, he gave me a book about that big to read. It's like Harry Potter, just about gardening. So let me tell you, I read it all. He was like, you better read every drop of it. I'm like, I will, I promise. All right, so I took notes, and I was like ready to go the day he showed up, and he was like, did you read about this? I was like, yes, sir, I did. Right. And so, I learned so much from him over the past few months. And reading this section of verses now, after spending time with him in that garden and learning from him and hearing the way he describes things and just the things he almost like spoke into being. I mean, like, if you plant this here and it's just, here's the sun, okay, this much shade during the day, it should be up here in about 32 days. And sure enough, 32 days later, I was like, well, here she is, all ready to go. Okay, it's like crazy how that happened. So, like, now that I read this section of verses, really 1, I guess, through 17, it makes you appreciate it a little differently, having been able to enjoy this garden this year. But I want us to read the first few verses, verses 1 through 9 together. He says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine, and neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers. The branches are gathered, and they are thrown into the fire, and they are burned. But if you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Abide in my love. A while back, Mr. Danny, one of the things he taught me was on your tomato plants to prune everything under the first fruit cluster. It was one of the things he told me to do, so I did. And I pruned, and I've kept pruning, and sadly, some of my tomato plants have been eaten up by army worms, but that's neither here nor there. I've sprayed them to death with malathion, and I'm sure the tomatoes will poison me now, but it is what it is. But I have really learned a lot, and as I pruned this tomato plant, I brought this little branch here with me tonight that, as you can tell, has been cut off. And I want you to imagine this. I ask, if we're not in COVID-19, I ask you to get up and everybody walk up here together and surround in a big circle, and I say, everybody put your hands in, and I want you to grab some piece of this branch. A little difficult, probably just put a finger on it, but I asked each of you to grab hold. So I want you to grab hold of this branch and get a good, tight, firm grip all together. And as one group, as a whole, I want each and every one of us to remove all of our distractions from our mind. I want us to focus all that we have in our hearts and our minds on this tomato plant branch that's been cut off. And all I want you to think about is how we can grow tomatoes on this. Now, here's a stipulation. No soil, no water, no seed, no fertilize, no sun. Just us all together as hard as we can, grunting as loud as we can, grabbing hold of this tomato branch. Are we ever going to grow tomatoes? I mean, if you say yes, you probably shouldn't garden. All right, so no, we are not going to grow tomatoes on this. The best I could do is get some twine and tie one off, all right? And I think we would all know the jig is up, okay? It is no more ridiculous for me to say, let's all get around here and think about this tomato plant branch as hard as we can, and let's all pull together one another, just us, let's do this, teamwork. It is no more ridiculous to imagine that we would grow tomato plants than it is to imagine that we will bear the fruit of the Spirit without Christ. It is no more ridiculous to imagine that we together can grow tomatoes off of this branch with no soil, with no water, with no sunlight, with no seed, with no fertilizer, than it is to imagine that we will bear the fruit of the Spirit and look like Christ without Him. No matter how many of us there are, no matter how many in this church we say there are, if we try to do this just by us or by ourselves, it will not happen. Bearing fruit without a committed connection to Christ is impossible. Why is the fruit of the Spirit? Why does it matter? Because it's the reflection of Christ on earth. And in order to show that reflection, we have to be connected to Christ. The past few months, I've noticed a few things. Number one, that I do not enjoy online worship. That is not for me. It was great at first. I feel like I grew a lot from it. It was just different. It was something, a little change up, I guess. But man, after a while, there is just something about being with other Christians. There is just something about being with people who believe in God together and being with the believers Even at work, I'm surrounded by believers 100% of the time. Like they're there. But there's just something about being with this body of believers, your church family. There's just something about it. And as I felt the online worship deal, and it is what it is, and I'm glad we're doing it, and glad that's happening across the country for the safety of people, and I'm glad that people feel comfortable doing that. But I've noticed things like my prayer life start to suffer. I've noticed my studying habits are basically non-existent. There's just something about this routine, and I hate to use the word routine here. There's something about being here on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights with you guys that keep me uplifted and my batteries recharged and keep me going with my faith. And when I don't have that, and I don't have this consistent relationship with Christ, things like the past 5 months where I don't bear fruit happen. Okay? So I tell you this, I don't know how much longer this is going to go where we have to be uncomfortable and all doing different things for the safety. But for me personally, I have got to focus more on my personal relationship with Christ. I've got to spend time in prayer with Him. I've got to spend time in the words that He left for me. I've got to spend time with Christ and develop that connection with Him, and I'm committed to Him. Because without Him, I will bear no fruit. And the fruit that I think I'm bearing is probably all fake. A lot of times I feel like we treat the fruit of the Spirit kind of like a farmer's market almost. You go and you get what you need when you want it. You go and you pick up what kind of fruit you need to share with whoever you need to share it with when it's needed. I really believe if we bear the fruit of the Spirit, if we're in a committed relationship with Christ and we bear the fruit of the Spirit, that it's almost just a second nature for us as we grow as a Christian. That there is no, okay, I've got time to think about the way this person said this to me. Let me think about it real quick. Okay, I'm going to act with patience. I'm going to act with joy and kindness and goodness and faithfulness and love. But instead, it's just an almost muscle memory. When we are in that fully committed relationship connection to Christ, there is no, let me think about this. It's I automatically do it because I believe and because I follow and because I'm studying and because I'm spending time in prayer and because I'm connected to Him. We'll go on to the rest of John chapter 15 and read the next few verses, and we'll finish out this chapter. He says in verse 10, "If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. Just as I have kept my Father's commandments, abide in His love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be full." You notice the two words he uses are two of the fruits listed later on, joy and love. "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends, and if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you, and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, He may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you will love one another." I think that last verse there might be the most important in a time like this. We cannot expect non-believers to give their lives to Christ during this storm of all these things going on around us if the believers themselves don't love one another. It is possible to disagree with someone and still show love to them. It is possible to be on a different side of a fence, even though probably in a lot of ways we should not care about those things. Politically, I don't know that we should invest all of our time and efforts into politics. It is still possible, though, to do that and to still love one another. If we think for 1 second that other people who don't know Christ are going to give their lives to Him and follow Him and come into these doors to worship with us, and we don't love each other, in what world does that make sense? He simply says here, if you abide in me, abide also in my love, as I have loved you. His last thing he says is, these things I command you, all these things I command you, so that you will love one another. Why does the fruit of the Spirit matter? Because if we are going to claim that we are Christians and we bear the fruit of the Spirit, it matters because in order to do that, we must love God and love people deeply. We must love each other deeply. I really believe the reason that it's so difficult doing online worship and those different things is because the relationship we have with each other, while we're not kin through necessarily blood and family, and we don't see each other at family reunions, but honestly, I spend more time with you guys than I really do any of my extended family. We are family. We are to love each other like family. We can disagree and have different times, and I did this in a Bible class 4 or 5 years ago, talking about unity, and it's like that Thanksgiving table when you all get together at Thanksgiving and like you sit across people, like, man, I just really don't like this person. But I'll still love him because he's my cousin. We still have a good time. Or, man, he and I could not be any more different. Like, growing up, my cousin would be playing like with Pokemon cards, and I was like, are y'all like ready to go shoot something? Or what's going on here? Are we going to play ball? What's up? But for some reason, as cousins, we still were like best friends. Completely different ends of the spectrum, still best friends. During all of this that's going on around us, and I mean everything in our world right now, and especially in America, we are tempted to pit ourselves against one another. And at times we are going to disagree. It is inevitable. But we must still love each other. Because if we don't, those who don't believe won't love us, and they won't love Christ. John chapter 15 is beautiful, and I believe it has something to do with what's written in Galatians chapter 5. And so I want to go through a couple more things really quickly, and some of this is kind of an idea of what can you do right now with this. What can I do? All right, so I want to encourage you to do a couple things. Number one, get rid of the distractions and the desires that pull you away from being led by the Spirit. A few months ago, and I'm telling you, I'm as much of a social media guy. I get the screen time notifications on Sunday, and sometimes it's like, boy, that is embarrassing. I should not tell anybody about that. But a few months ago, I noticed every time that I got on Facebook, it was just the most frustrating thing, because everything I read I felt like it didn't matter at all with eternity. It has nothing to do with Scripture for the most part. But the things that were making me angry were just things that were going on in America, and I just disagreed with people. It is just reality. I disagreed with them. And it didn't matter what side they were on. I disagreed with everybody. And man, I could just feel my blood pressure rising. I could feel my watch, my heart monitor was like, you might want to take a breath, okay? I could just feel my attitude changing. And so, something as simple as deleting Facebook, okay? If it really gives you that much anger and that much of a burden on your life, get rid of it. It is not worth losing and bearing fruit. It is not worth it. If you are so invested in the politics going on in America that it makes you angry to know what someone else votes, quit talking to people about it. Remove that distraction from your life if it is preventing you from bearing fruit of the Spirit. Do not be afraid to remove earthly things from your life, things that are just American, and I'm all for being an American, but if it is hindering you from bearing fruit of the Spirit and being a disciple, get rid of it. I promise you it is worth it. And there are still some things that I've got to kind of clean out in my life. Number two, ask yourself this question, if you have time. Does what I'm about to do or what I'm about to take part in or what is about to happen, does it reflect the fruit of the Spirit and in turn make disciples? It should be a pretty simple yes or no question for the most part. There should be no it might. Most of the time I feel like it's going to be yes or no. If the answer is no, obviously, remove yourself. Don't take part in it. Don't do that. Stay away from it. Don't be afraid to ask yourself that question. Number three, pray for a full commitment and connection to Christ. Last night as I laid in bed, we went to Justin and Amy's house with a few friends or whatever, and we went over there, and we were kind of talking back and forth, and I was studying for this. I've been kind of reading all day about it, and I told a friend of mine at work, I was just like, man, I'm struggling with this lesson. I don't know. And he was like, when's the last time you prayed? And I was like, man, really prayed, not like about to eat dinner pray. Seriously sat down and prayed to God. It had been a while. And so last night I just prayed before I went to bed and spent time in prayer. And let me tell you, I just prayed that God would help me to get my commitment back and that connection to Christ back that I felt not long ago. And I still struggled. Don't let me lie to you like I was in a perfect state. Okay, I still struggled. But I could tell there's been a big difference here recently. When you go home tonight, if you've been struggling with this, pray for God to help you have a full commitment and connection to Christ and to Him. I mean, pray for that. Pray for you to bear fruit of the Spirit in Galatians 5. And finally, this is the last one I needed to hear. I heard this not long ago. Someone said this to me at work, and it was someone who I respect a lot at work. And I was in a situation where some people were saying some things, and it had nothing to do with all that's going on in America. It was just a different situation. It was just work-related. And they had their opinion, and I had mine. And I felt like mine was right. I've been doing this longer than they have. I know more about it. And I'm pretty successful at it, so I want to do what I want to do. And this guy said to me, he said, look, you know, we're all Christians in this room together. This was afterwards, just me and him. He said, we're all Christians here together. You know, he said, there's no sense in getting angry. I was like, I know. You know, preaching to the choir, I know that. I got to watch my anger. And he said, know this. He said, honestly, he said, they probably would have did what you wanted to do had you listened. He said, but you were pretty quick to fire back and tell them what you thought. And I said, yep, that's me, to a T. And he said, had you taken the time to just listen and show them that you cared and that you loved, maybe you could have changed their mind on that, and maybe they would have followed what you said. Loving people and loving each other a lot of times just means listening. And at times like we are in right now, people are going to say things that are going to offend you without a doubt. They're going to be against, a lot of times non-believers are going to say things that are not what we believe. But we can't hold non-believers to the expectations of ourselves because they don't know Christ. We can't be quick to speak, quick to anger. But let us be quick to hear and to listen. Loving people sometimes means listening. The other night when I was at Danny's house, we were over there talking and just kind of going back and forth. And again, every time I'm with him, I feel like he says something that is so wise. So, man, I need to just record everything you ever say. So someday I can just make a lot of money off of it and send it to some publisher and he can write everything down that you said. And it's it's really impressive. And so we're sitting there, me and Liv are, and of course, I'm busting jokes like I always do, just trying to make Danny laugh and like I do everybody. And we're talking back and forth, and he says, before y'all leave, he said, he was talking about the widow and widower ministry he's a part of here at Stantonville, and what a great ministry that is. That's so great we did. I can't wait for you guys to get back to doing that. And it's just great we serve the widows and widowers. He was talking about a lesson that, I can't remember his name for the life of me, but the guy who started it with you, Mr. Andy and Miss Beth, the guys that helped you started it, his first lesson he did here, he mentioned three steps, I guess, or three things to remember as someone who is widowed. And he mentioned the first two, which they were very applicable to what he was sharing with us last night, or the 2 nights ago. But his third point, boy, I heard it and I was like, man, I've got to use that Wednesday night. His third point was don't waste the pain. And he kind of mentioned what pain has looked like for him. Of course, I can't fathom what he's dealt with in the past few months. Past few years. I can't fathom that at all. And the pain he's going through with his sickness and things like that. But he said, don't waste the pain. And he said, with married couples, he's like, for you guys who are young and just recently married, I don't want you to waste the pain. I don't want to waste the pain and not tell you what I learned from my marriage of being married to Miss Joanne. And he said, Joe, don't take for granted Liv, of course, and, love her and compliment her and tell her you always care about her. And don't forget to do that. The things that she needs, do it. He said, at times I forgot to do that with Joanne and I regret it. And he's like, so I don't want to waste the pain that I'm having now to share that with you while I can. I thought, man, that is so wise. And I thought afterwards, man, it's kind of true for us right now as well in not wasting the pain. The past few months have been painful. This fever blister is painful, okay? The relationships that, man, I was telling you, people that I love dearly that are brothers and sisters in Christ, we've had arguments, and, man, I don't know how that's going to affect our relationship, but it's been painful. There's been moments of pain. At work, there have been moments of pain. But I tell you, let's not waste it. Let's not waste the pain because we get a chance to be disciples and to be believers. and to show other people Christ by bearing the fruit of the Spirit. The things that we have seen the past few months, in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like it, and I'm sure for some of you, you've never seen anything like it either. And it's, again, been painful. It's been stressful. It's been very stressful. Don't waste it. Take this time to learn and to grow in your relationship with Christ and to develop that connection and that commitment to Christ to where when we are interacting with non-believers, we will bear fruit. And that fruit in turn will make disciples. Tonight, if you are struggling with this, which I'm sure we all are, I'm sure we all could probably walk up here and confess to things that we've been doing the past few months that we shouldn't be doing or shouldn't have said. I'm sure that's reality. I hope it is, because if not, I'm the only one. But, I just want to tell you, if you're struggling with something, sure, come forward tonight. We would love to sit here and pray with you and love on you. I mean, we can't sit by each other, obviously, and hug. But if you need something in these weird times we can't hug and love on each other, don't be afraid to rely on each other and bear one another's burdens like he talks about in Galatians chapter 6. This is what this is all about. I mean, this is us relying on one another, loving one another, caring for one another. When others are down, we pick the other up. That's what this is all about. So that eventually we can bear more fruit and bring more disciples through these doors and show them Christ.